Hey everyone, welcome to our fourth Gremlin office hours on how to run chaos engineering experiments in your CI/CD pipeline. Some quick notes before we get started. This is an interactive webinar. We really want to hear from you as much as you want to hear from us. So again, if you have any questions at all, feel free to enter them into the Q&A panel. Or if you'd like, just hang out in the chat channel, say hi, let us know where you're coming from, what CI/CD issues you've dealt with in the past. And yeah, just feel free to hang out. After the presentation, we will allow folks to unmute yourself. So if you'd like to ask a question out loud or have any additional thoughts, you can do so. This webinar will be recorded, so the recording will be made available afterwards in case you want to watch it again. And just so you know, if you're not aware, this is a monthly series. We run our office hours the second Thursday of every month. So if you'd like to join us for additional sessions, you can do so by going to gremlin.com/office hours. So to introduce myself, I'm Andre Newman, a senior reliability specialist here at Gremlin, and I'm joined by Daryl Dunn, our senior solutions architect, also here at Gremlin. He's going to show you how this works in practice. And again, we're here to answer your questions. So if you have them, feel free to send them over to us. So a quick look at what we're going to go over today. I'll start with just a short presentation talking about where chaos engineering and reliability testing fit into the CI/CD pipeline. Talk a bit about how or different ways that you can use experiments in your pipeline, specifically as gating functions. Daryl will run through a demo showing how Gremlin CI/CD integration works in practice. And then again, we'll leave time open at the end for Q&A. So I'd like to start off each session with some goals, right? Just what is the point of this topic and what are we hoping to achieve from this? First is we want to build a CI/CD pipeline that runs chaos engineering experiments. We want to be able to test the reliability of our services as we're building them and as we're deploying to production so that we can hopefully catch and prevent any nasty production outages. And of course, we want to verify that our services are resilient so they're not susceptible to things like scaling issues or failover issues, things like that. And also, if you have any goals or takeaways yourself that you'd like to get from your session, maybe something that you're working on, if you're involved in the CI/CD at your company, any projects or initiatives that you're involved in, definitely let us know. That helps keep the conversation flowing so it's not just us talking to you, right? We want to know what you're dealing with and what you're trying to overcome as well. So I'm probably preaching to the choir on what CI/CD is, but it's always helpful to just start with some baseline definitions. So I won't go into too much detail, but just to level set, CI/CD generally refers to any automated process where we take incremental code changes created by developers and then send it out to production. And the goal is to have this done both quickly and reliably. So if we kind of step back and think about the days of waterfall development, we had these massive long development cycles that went on for months or even years. There were these clearly defined stages from development to QA to acceptance testing. And then when companies adopted agile development, that all changed. Cycles shrunk to weeks, if that, and engineers are constantly making and deploying small incremental changes. Some teams at big companies like Facebook are pushing out hundreds or thousands of changes every day. So the old methods and toolings just weren't fast enough. And CI/CD is a way to let engineers push this code to production quickly while still having those checks in place to make sure that the code isn't going to fail or cause problems. So where does reliability fit into all this? Please excuse the old image. You can tell it's old because of the gremlins, but it still gets the point across. Reliability testing fits into a few different places, mainly during the test and post-release processes. And the key word that we use during this process is verification. A lot of the times when we talk about chaos engineering, we're talking about exploratory testing, right? Where we're not sure how our systems will respond to certain failure conditions. So we're going to run experiments to recreate and test those conditions and find the reliability risks. Verification is what happens when we've already identified some risks and we've already built some tests. And so now we want to confirm that our fixes are working the way they should and the way we need them to. Think of it a bit like unit testing or integration testing, right? You develop a new feature, you write a unit test to test an assumption about how your code will work. And then once your code passes, you add that unit test to your test suite and run it every time you run a new build, so you don't get any regressions or surprises. And the primary way that we do that with reliability testing is using Gremlin's REST API. And you can use our API to kick off experiments, check the experiment status, and more importantly, check whether your server is passed or failed. So we'll see a bit of that later during the demo. So I want to cover a few ways that this can work in practice. These approaches aren't mutually exclusive necessarily, but they just apply chaos engineering and reliability testing in a couple different ways. First is a bit about what you saw on the last slide, is what we call gating releases on the outcome of a test. This is where, let's say you have a step in your CI/CD pipeline that sends an API request to Gremlin to kick off a scenario or a reliability test. This is pretty simple. All you have to do is copy and paste the REST API command from Gremlin into your CI/CD tool like Jenkins or whatever it might be. There's some additional logic you can use to check when the scenario finishes and to get the results back of whether your services passed or failed. But that's mostly it. And in fact, if you're using services in RM or reliability management, you can actually you can step this up by integrating your reliability score too. So what you would do is you'd use the Gremlin API again to kick off your reliability test suite. And once it's done, get the reliability score for your service, compare it to a threshold, let's say 80% or higher. And if it's so, let it continue to production and let the deployment process complete. Otherwise, you would stop the build so you avoid pushing defects or reliability issues into production. So sort of like you have a reliability check built into your CI/CD process. You want to make sure that your service is at least as reliable as that threshold you set. And if so, it's fine to continue on. Otherwise, kick it back, maybe notify the developer that there was a regression or other issues so that they can go in and fix it and make your service more reliable. So the next one is waiting until after production to kick off testing. And the reason for this is that, admittedly, reliability testing can take a while. Individual scenarios in Gremlin can last anywhere from a few minutes up to 15 minutes, sometimes longer. And depending on the number of tests you want to run and how many services you're testing, this community of changes might be sitting in your CI/CD platform for hours. So for teams that push infrequently, that might be fine, but for others, it might be a bit too time consuming. So an alternative is to just go ahead and push your changes through your pipeline like normal, send them to production, and then after that, trigger your tests. You still get that feedback on whether your service passed or failed its tests, but it comes after the fact. So there's some potential for an incident still. But at the same time, it's implemented the same way. You take the API calls, you move them to the end of the pipeline instead of the middle, and have them run there. You get a little bit of delay, a little bit of a latency between the test results and when your new changes enter production, but you're not blocking the entire pipeline off of these tests. And the last method actually doesn't touch your CI/CD pipeline at all. Instead, you just schedule your experiments to run on a regular cadence. Maybe every Monday, Wednesday, or Friday night if you're brave. Do it at 6 p.m. Eastern time, right after everybody leaves for the weekend, just for laughs. But still, the idea is that you have these tests scheduled to run regularly. And since this is decoupled from your build pipeline, it means that you can run your tests whenever you want and also deploy whenever you want. But it also means that any reliability problems that enter production might not be detected for however long it is between the deployment and when those tests are scheduled to run. So this one is less intrusive in a sense, but there's also a greater amount of latency between when you deploy and when those tests might go checking for reliability issues. So I know this is a big table. I'm sorry for all the text. It's a lot to go through. So if you would like to pull this up on your own, you can use that link on the bottom, gremlin.com/blog/where to automate resilience testing in your SDLC to see this for yourself. But I just wanted to include this slide to show how these methods compare against each other. This is basically a summary of what I just mentioned, just presented in a single table. So in short, getting releases catches some risks before production and fits into your existing testing cycles, but it requires running production-like environments, which can be tricky. It can miss certain types of risks if it's not fully, if it's not all-inclusive of the tests that you want to run. And it could also create false confidence if you test in pre-production instead of production. And most importantly, it slows down the pipeline too, because you have to wait for all those tests to finish before continuing. Running tests after production deployments is a bit faster, and it also catches the same amount of risks. And because it's running in production, right, you've already deployed the application, it can find those reliability risks that are only present in production. But again, it can slow down the pipeline somewhat. It requires some monitoring to be set up to be able to monitor your production systems and make sure that they're responding okay and that you're able to fall back from scenario if it ends up causing issues that you didn't expect. And it can also miss risks that come from outside the CI/CD pipeline. And then lastly, regularly scheduled testing can easily run in production and has zero impact on pipeline time, but it also requires good monitoring and adds that little bit of a delay between when you deploy and when you detect those risks. Again, there's a lot of text here. If you want to check it out yourself, you can just follow that link to our blog and see it there, as well as a more detailed explanation about how all these different strategies work and how they all compare. So for now, I'm going to pass it over to Daryl to show us how this works in practice.
Hey, thanks, Andre. Good afternoon. Let me share my screen really quick. All right, is my screen visible?
Yep, you're good.
Perfect. So we base our demo environment on the OpenTelemetry demo, Astronomy Shop. Feel free to download it for yourself. It's great to do some practice and get your Gremlin sea legs. So we've got these initial services here that have already been put into Gremlin. I got the front end service, so let's we will start there. So with the front end, if I want to run just experiments, I come into Gremlin and I'm able to run fault injection experiment, and I can run inside of that service, and with its Kubernetes objects targeted, no problem. And then we also have added it to our services count here. So this is where we're going to home in, and then I've added a front end, and I'm getting these my score back. So as you notice, my score is 74%. My reliability is, I would like it higher, but this is where we're at. So my scalability, redundancy, dependencies, and risks are the 4 dimensions that I'm scored on. Exactly what Andre was talking about. I have it auto scheduled. So I've got a window where it runs, and this is important when you see the Jenkins side of things here. So this score is supposed to stay fresh. I haven't run them in a while, so that's why they've gone to expired. And so if I go and look at Jenkins now, let me move my window down a little bit. If I look at Jenkins, I've got this astronomy front end build. So I'm going to go ahead and make a build now, and then we'll go through the overview of it. And so a build is running, and we should see lucky build 13 come through, and there it is. So if I look at my pipeline, I'm doing different stages here. So I am running my chaos test after my testing stage. So running my performance functional testing here, but I'm in the build section, I'm doing a little check. So if we scroll down, you'll see I am checking the score inside of Gremlin to see where is my reliability score at. If you notice, I pulled the service score 74 is greater than 70. So 70 is my minimum. So in this environment, if I go below that, then my pipeline is going to fail. And of course, as you know, Jenkins, you can do all kinds of things here. You can just create a warning, or you can fail the whole build. This one will fail the whole build. And so I can stop there. And then as part of my testing, I also kicked off a chaos test. So I got my regular testing here, and then I've also kicked off a chaos test here for CPU. So we did a little CPU stress test, and it was successful. And then we ran that as part of our testing. So I wanted to point out 2 things here. So in our build section, before we go, we're being preemptive. We're looking at that proxy of risk and saying, hey, my score for this environment is where it should be. So I'm good to go on this. And you're utilizing all this inside of Gremlin to, at your advantage to say, hey, I know that I can scale CPU memory. I know that host and zone are okay. And I know all my dependencies are okay. And then I have my detected risks, and they're in range of where I want them to be. So let's say all I have to do is go in and add some CPU limits on my front end service, and my score is going to go up. So this gives you some leverage too with your teams to say, hey, we made a change. There's a change here that has increased, unreliability. what was it, what do we need to do? And if you incorporate that as part of your CI/CD pipeline, then you can take action on it. So if we go back to Gremlin as well, I've got one that it fails here, and I'm going to run that for you, just so you can see what a fail looks like. So if we look at the overview, so threshold 74 is less than the passing threshold is 80. So this one did pass. But no, I'm sorry. So on our post actions, we reevaluated. We were able to successfully read the API, but we're completing with a failure because we're below our threshold. So we're sending this one through to a failure. My job, my astronomy one here will pass because it's 74, not below 70. So yeah, that's a basic nutshell demo for Gremlin, and I will pause there. And I think we've got some questions in the chat, and we'll cover those.
Yeah, we had a couple of come through. Just before that, I'll share my screen again. We have some links that you all can use if you'd like to learn a bit more. So it's gonna be 1 second while I pull that up. All right, so just to give you guys some next steps, if you'd like to actually jump into this, it's really easy. You can head into the app, either pull up your scenarios or your services. We actually generate API requests for you right there. So if you get onto the bottom right corner of the Gremlin screen, and I believe there's a link that says manage API calls or get help with API calls, just click on that and you'll see a pane pop up with links to call your scenario or call your reliability test from the API. And again, we're doing this monthly. If you'd like to see our future sessions, you can do so by going to gremlin.com/office hours. And if you wanted to see that table again to compare these different methods, you can also go to the link on the blog at the bottom. So I see we had a few questions come in. We did have some questions come in during the webinar that were answered. So I'll just kind of repeat those in case anybody missed them. First was, is there a Gremlin command line interface, or do most people use something like curl? And while there is a Gremlin CLI, it's mostly used by the agent to do verification and make sure it was installed correctly. We recommend using the REST API and using curl to actually kick off these experiments. So again, there is a CLI available, but the recommended way is to use the API. And another question, can we use this in what I think is an acronym for Azure DevOps? And as long as your CI/CD tool can make REST API calls, you're good. You can use this. Doesn't matter if it's Azure, AWS, Jenkins. As long as it can make those API calls to our backend servers, you can use this. There's a question on, can we share the recording? Yep, the recording will be distributed after the webinar ends. Usually takes about an hour or so for us to get it up. So just keep an eye on your emails for when that's made available. And another question, I don't know if this one's more for you, Daryl. Do you have a demo repo available with any of this, any of the examples that you used?
I don't, but I'll be glad to share them. I can put a repo out there with the API calls.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll get back to you on that, Kenny. Another good question. Is there documentation for triggering experiments for your API? I'm very glad you asked, because we have a full Swagger documentation of our API along with the various calls. Actually, I'll pull it up on here. So if you go to docs.gremlin.com/API, I believe, just scroll down and head over to API reference. You'll be able to pull up all the different endpoints that you can call, the parameters that you need to provide to them. Not really sure why this is taking so long to load. There we go. So like if you want to kick off a scenario, we have an endpoint for scenarios. If you want to kick off a test suite, you can use the reliability management endpoint to access your test suites and your scores and all of that. And if you need examples, we also have a section with examples here too. This will show you how to like authenticate and get your API keys and all that. another one came through and got answered before I could even actually read it. But the question was, what's the recommended way to organize services when testing different projects? And Daryl answered it for us. We recommend using tags to organize different projects. We also have the different teams that you can use. So if your organization has multiple teams or you have teams that are working on specific services, you can split them out that way as well. So that way you don't have everybody running all sorts of attacks on all the same services and falling over each other. But yeah, I'd say teams and tags are the primary ways that we recommend organizing your different projects and services. Ooh, lots of really good questions. Any others anybody has? Keeping an eye on the chat and the Q&A panel just in case. And while folks are thinking up any questions, I'll show another quick example of what those API requests look like. So if you log into your Gremlin account, sorry for the tiny text, and for example, you go to scenarios and you have a scenario that you want to run during your pipeline, you can just click into it. And then here's where we have that link of API examples. Just click on that, and then you get a pane that pops up with all the different API examples you can use. There's already authentication built in, so you don't need to include that. Pretend you didn't see this because it's authentication. My authentication is included in it, but you get the gist. You can just copy this, paste this into your pipeline steps, and it'll run just fine as if you started it yourself in the web app. There was a question for the demo that was provided today. Can the Gremlin part be shared for that CPU spike? I'm not entirely sure what this is referring to. I think the question is, how would you recreate a CPU spike like that? That's a certain type of experiment we have that's called, simply enough, a CPU experiment. You can do that simply by going into experiments, going into a new experiment, configuring it the way that you normally would. So let's say you want to pick a host that you want to target. And then under choose a Gremlin, you would just go to resource and select that CPU experiment. And here's where you configure it, like how much to use, how long to run for, things like that. And if you're creating a scenario, you can also use that here too. But if you have services that you've created and you're using the default test suite, the one that comes with Gremlin, we also just include the CPU test already pre-made and ready to go here. So you can just add your service, scroll down to CPU and click run. So there are a few different ways to run it, basically depending on how much you want to configure it yourself. Oh, okay, I see. It was actually a question about the pipeline. That code can be shared. Daryl mentioned that he can create a repository, so I think we can include that there. But that'll happen after the webinar. So we'll need to get back to you on when that's available. I saw a question in the chat. Will a recording be made of this webinar? Yep, we'll have a recording made after the webinar ends, and we'll post that on our website. I believe we'll also send out email notifications when it's ready, so you'll be able to find it there too. Great questions. Are there any others?
Sai asked, can we export metrics on how many experiments were run? And the answer is yes. That's also through the API. You can show runs on any service or any experiment, ever how you want to scope it.
And yeah, the link to the webinar recordings will also be made available once that recording is available. We'll post it on our website. If you don't get a notification on where it is, or you just want to check back and see when it's available, you can head over to gremlin.com/office hours, and we'll have it available down here under previous office hours. You can just click into that and the recordings are right there. Short answer is that you'll get an email after the webinar ends with a link to it, and we'll also post it on our website, so you can always go back there too. Any other questions? All right, well, if that's all there is, then I think we can wrap this up for now. If you do think of any questions after we close up, feel free to reach out to us at gremlin.com/contact, or shoot us an email. We'll be happy to get back to you and set you up with a reliability expert to help you out and figure out what problems you're dealing with and where we can help you. But in the meantime, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate all the great questions. Hope the session was informative to you and that you have some ideas about how this can work in your own pipelines. In the meantime, thanks so much for joining us and hope you have a great rest of your week. Take care, everyone.